little bit more. There, right
Perfect.
there.
Everyone is welcome here, it's time to make new friends. Fill your Glencairn. Share a dram with the spirit of Edmonton. Sluncha!
And welcome back. And sorry for the technical difficulties. We got it all figured out. We're here. But what we're going to do again is we're going to thank the viewer for being here. We're going to thank our fantastic panel, everyone on every side of us and up and down for being here. And again, it's the After Dram, and I'll say it again. It's time to unwind. Put your feet up. Grab a dram or two, a cocktail or two, whatever it takes to relax on this Friday night. And do so. Relax. Be here. Quick recap, though. Ash, Joss, Kent, Rich, and I have been treated to a fantastic time at Copperworks Distillery in Seattle, Washington, USA. And we've tasted release number 31, this one right here. And that's their American single malt. And now we're on to release number 32, this one right here. And we see it, the cast finish gin. So that's release 32. And I'm looking forward to it. We've poured cocktails that equal up 5.5 ounces of alcohol, which is a little bit dangerous, I think, but that's what Jeff told me to do. So that's what I did. And we're going to see how that turns out in a little bit. We had fun. It was informative. But what we're going to do right now, Josh, we're going to start with you, then Ash, and then Kent and Richard, and then Jason, and then Jeff. We're going to have introductions and tell us your handles. I'm not going to put the little things on the bottom, but just tell us who you are and what we're doing.
Well, I'm Joss from Dram Society here in Toronto. Here to enjoy like everybody else. We tried a fantastic whiskey dram previous session. We're now moving into the gin, which we've actually had a little bit of a chance to enjoy. My wife, who is in the background, who was actually just stepped in, she just said, "Wow, this is fantastic," and she did it neat. We're trying it in a little bit of a cocktail here, which we were lucky enough to have a bunch of ingredients shared with us, but. I'll pass it on to Ash here to introduce himself.
And welcome Joss's lovely wife in the background.
Well, she may make an appearance. I'll pull her in. She's a little camera shy, but hey, we're kicking back, like you said. So when she shows up, I'll definitely drag her into the frame here. Excellent.
Please do. Thank you, buddy. Ash.
My name is Ash. I'm Joss's right-hand man here in Toronto. We co-founded the Dram Society of Toronto about 9 years ago, and we've been drinking whiskey as much as we can, or more or less as much as our wives will let us for the last 9 years. I mean, aside from that, I'm a food producer. I own something called the Samosery here in Toronto, and we do something very cool and different with Indian staple called the samosas. And I'm a very big whiskey and spirit enthusiast, and I'm pretty much loving this gin. It is wonderful, and I have more to say about it and more to ask about it, more importantly. But yeah, having a great time so far this night.
Thank you so much there, Ash, and glad to have you on board. Mm-hmm. And Kent, you're up, buddy.
Hi, my name's Kent. I go by Whiskey Ass on pretty much all forms. I'm not much of a gin drinker, but in the last 6 months, I've kind of gotten into it. And I'm finding gins are now starting to get into my palate. So I guess it's something that you either acquire or you really love. And I'm really enjoying these cocktails. So you guys, keep it up. You're making some great product. It's nice to see. There's a lot of substandard products out there. You guys definitely don't fall in that category. So the only other thing, I wish you were Canadian and not American, because then I could just appreciate that much more.
Oh, that's good. We appreciate our friends down south. Just fine. Richard, you're up.
Hey, how you doing? Richard Lee from Salt Spring Island. I've got the We Rock Whiskey Club here on Salt Spring. Run a whiskey tasting club. We taste lots of whiskey and stuff. We're actually planning on doing one of our first gin tastings. It was ideally going to be last summer, but COVID hit. Maybe we can throw this one into the tasting. Super happy to be here. Stoked to be here. And I've tried the gin. I'm loving it as well. So let's bring it on.
Barrel aged. Woohoo! Jason, kind sir, it's your turn.
Well, thank you. I'm the president and co-founder of Copperworks Distilling. My name is Jason Parker, and you can reach me at jason@copperworksdistilling.com. What this gin is, we're going to get into a lot of detail, but it is a whiskey drinker's gin. We call it a Jinski in-house a lot of the times because it actually serves the need of a whiskey and the need of a gin. That's why we bottle it at 100 proof. I can't wait to hear your questions, and we'll talk about the cocktails next with Jeff.
Thank you. And Jeff, you're up.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Canoff, Vice President and co-owner at Copperworks Distilling, and kind of playing towards what Jason said right there. He kind of served that up for me. We have two cocktails that we're recommending tonight. One is more of a gin-based cocktail. One is more of a whiskey-based cocktail. So the first one is called The New Word. It's based on the Last Word cocktail, which is typically gin, lime juice, maraschino, cherry liqueur, and green chartreuse. We're kind of subbing the regular gin for this cask finished gin and subbing the lime for lemon, and it's equal parts of those four ingredients. And then the other one is what we call the New Oak Sazerac. So we basically make a classic Sazerac cocktail that was invented in New Orleans, but instead of using whiskey in that, we're going to substitute our cask finished gin. Really pairs well with the absinthe rinse that's classic in that drink because you have all the botanicals working with the botanicals in the absinthe. So check those out and see what you think. And we'll obviously talk a lot more about the gin.
Yes, we will. But this one's kind of dangerous. 3.5 ounces of gin in this guy. And and then, well, the bitters. But the first one,
I think it was only supposed to be 2.5 ounces.
Yeah,
but,
it was supposed to be 2.5, not 3.5.
the more the merrier, you know.
Okay. Well, yeah, the more the merrier. Thank you very much. And this one is not 1 3/4 ounces of Copperworks, 1 3/4 ounces of green chartreuse, and 1 3/4 ounces of maraschino liqueur, and a little bit of lemon juice.
0.75.
Yeah,
That's
that was
right.
supposed to be half. I think you doubled it up, but you know, you're thirsty.
No,
Wait,
it's 7.75. I'm being funny. I'm being
we
really
love the way you drink. We need more drinkers doubling up the recipes every time.
Yeah,
Yep.
not on the air.
Make
I
a
still have an hour to make it through, and still, well, I've got to get my stuff together. It's very important. Hi to Craftworks in the background. Jeff, so good. It is, and we had a lot of fun in the first part. We're going to have comments from the peanut gallery down below as they come up. And if you guys see comments on the side, if you can bring them up as well, because I'm not really looking at the comments on the side. My wife's popping them all up, but I'm really not paying attention. It's what happens when you have 3.5 ounces and then 1 3/4, 1 3/4, 1 3/4 ounces. I'm focusing on the words, and that's it. That's all. And you know what? Let's concentrate on the gin. But let's concentrate on the barley background of the gin. So, Jason, Jeff, whoever wants to talk, tell us why you decided that you were going to do everything with barley, if you could, please.
Well, let me take the first stab at it, and because I was a little bit earlier in that decision, but I also want to give Jeff a moment to reply to that. So when Micah and I came from the brewing background, we wanted everything to be malted barley. What we didn't even know until we went to Scotland and visited with Forsyth is that we could make everything from malted barley. We could make vodka from malted barley. When we learned we could make vodka from malted barley, and then we learned that gin is flavored vodka, basically a grain neutral spirits that has botanicals added to it and redistilled, we made the decision nothing other than malted barley. We are a malted barley house. Beer is our background. Malted barley is our skill. We're going to focus just on that. So by making beer into vodka and then vodka into gin, we were able to create a gin that had texture, flavor that wasn't dry. It was actually kind of sweet and a little bit silky compared to a London dry gin, which is with a more neutral, grain neutral spirits. Well, those flavors are the exact flavors that go well in a barrel. So it totally made sense to start putting some of our gin in barrels. The first barrel we decided to put it in was a brand new barrel, and that's this gin.
And it's fantastic. And Jeff, did you have a say at any point in time?
Well, you know,
or was the decision already made?
I was certainly here for the barrel decision. Yeah, so I was late to the game for the gin recipe. But what's so amazing about the gin, right, is that it's very traditional gin botanicals. So I think that's a question that would naturally come up. These are botanicals you're going to find in most London dried gins. So the story of our gin is not about the botanicals. It's really rooted in that barley base, and that's what makes it drink extremely different from any other London dry gin that would have the same botanicals. And then the barrel process, you know, we have what we call our experimental cask finished gins. And really the New Oak gin was the first of those. You know, it wasn't called that at the time because we didn't even have our current packaging at the time. But it started as an experiment. Like Jason said, we had those barrels around, we put it in and we just tasted every so often. And when it got to 101 days, we tasted it. And we didn't taste it on purpose at 101 days. We just tasted it then, and we said, "This is damn good," and released it. And you know, it was a special product for a while. And then about a year and a half, 2 years from that first time, we decided we're going to make this all the time. This is going to add to our core lineup.
Yeah, to be fair, we actually tasted it every 15 minutes. So yeah,
There's
it was
only
just
a little bit
101
left.
days. So we still have a little bit left.
Yeah.
They
And a lot
started
of people-
enough to produce one bottle.
And a lot of people think it's kind of a stupid choice to waste a barrel on gin, you know? So they think, oh, well, let's use an old whiskey barrel because then we've already used it once. But the flavor difference is dramatic. And you can even just see it from the color. Even if you don't get to try this product, when you just see the color of it, you can tell this is different than a bourbon barrel gin, which is much lighter in character on the barrel because the bourbon took all the character from the barrel.
And because of the malt, it really does work well with that New Oak. Whereas I think of the grain neutral spirit that's been filtered to pure neutrality, it really doesn't work. It's just kind of like wood character. So we felt like we were qualified to do that with the base.
I'm going to throw a question about your malting. So you still go through Great Western malting, Skagit malting, and Link malting?
Not so much
else?
Great Western. We're mostly Link and Skagit Valley now. So, but we look forward to when Great Western Malting opens up its small malt house. They're working on that now. I think 2023 will be when that's available. Here's a short story: is we want to feature Washington malts, and we want to feature the difference in the farms, the flavors, and the vintage. In order to do that, we have to have small malt houses making small pieces that they move through the malt house. Great Western Malting is so large and so successful at big batches that they have to blend a lot of farms malt in. And that's not really what we're about. So we've been able to focus on Skagit Valley malting and Link malting, primarily with
There's a third company called Mainstem Malt.
Mainstem, thank you.
They have a lot of the relationships. They're working to get their own malt house online, but right now they have the farming relationships and they work with other malt houses to malt the grain.
So Mainstem isn't yet. They're a broker right now. They're not a malt house, but they work with those guys. And I just have to say the relationship with them, even though the cocktail made me forget their name temporarily, is fantastic. And I love working with Phil.
And you talk about your relationships a lot, and the videos, the IGTV videos, you've garnered relationships with the breweries and with the farmers and other distillers as well. How did you establish a relationship with the farmers? Did you call them up and say, hey, could you produce something like the Link Baroness barley for me so I can make something completely unique and just stick with them? Help me out. How do you make these links?
It's a funny thing because I'd been a brewer for all those years, from 1989 to 2000, and it never, ever crossed my mind that I could meet a farmer. Base grain was always a commodity, and caramel malts and roasted malts and dark malts came from Europe. So I had no idea about farming. When everything changed, when small malt houses started opening, the Cascadia Grains Conference, which is now in its 5th year this year, I'm on the board of that, and I've been a keynote speaker to that. The reason that that's so important to me is because that's where I met farmers. That's where I met small malt houses. That's where I met Phil at Mainstem Malt. And all of this has turned into direct relationships where we work with the farmer and the malt house to make a flavor that we had never been able to do before. It was all coming to us from a big malt house. And this is just brand new.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to it when they think about other things they consume. So you don't hear about this in whiskey very often, but if you think about your favorite foods, your favorite restaurants, 35, 40 years ago, nobody cared where the products came from. Then, people like Alice Waters at Chapin East came around, and, droves of other chefs after her and started saying, where's this coming from? And why does it taste this way? And how can I get, the best version of it? And that's sort of what we're trying to do with all these amazing partners at the malt house level and the farmer level. And frankly, even people that are supporting it with putting on conferences and getting everybody together. It's so important to, push that forward and start thinking about, what's the actual flavor of the barley, not just, the barrel afterwards.
All right, so that's sounding a lot like terroir to me, gentlemen. And it's a hot topic everywhere. So I'm going to throw you into the fire. Tell me, you apparently believe in terroir. It really seems like it. And could you tell me if you do or if you don't, and then why? Why?
Why? We do. The reason we do is because we know that and here's how we know. We know because we've made it. So we've literally taken 5 different malts from 7 different farms.
Okay.
In 1 year, we have been able to see the change in flavors of the varieties of malts, even the same malt, but on one side on the west of the Cascades, one on the east of the Cascades, in new make whiskey. Now, the question is, of course, what happens to that whiskey when you put it in a barrel? Do you lose all the nuance? The possibility was yes. The answer turns out to be no, that you can still get the texture, the sweetness, maybe one of them is more fruity or floral. And I'm not talking about from yeast because we're using the same yeast and the same fermentation, but they literally come across as different products. What's been so exciting about it is that the only way to accomplish that is with small batches, really tiny batches. You can't be an international standard flavor company and make everything terroir based. It just doesn't work. You have to blend too many malts. But if you're doing small releases that are all, numbered on the bottle, then you can make that work.
So we've got 5 different malts, you said, from 7. How many bottles do we have? How many bottles can we put side by side right now? How many releases do we have right now that have come from specific farms that have been aged for just about the same amount of time in just about the same wood that we could compare? Because I know you can't get exactly the same thing every time, but we could try to get as close as possible. And are you happy with how close you got the process for all of these releases, and how many do you have?
Yes and no. So we're happy that they do differentiate, but this is a big data problem for all the tech nerds on the screen. There are so many things. How much rain was there? What was the temperature? What conditions what type of soil additives, if any, did they use? Did they sprinkle the farm or not? Is it dry farming? And then you get into the malt house, and then you get into the brewery, and then you get into the fermentation, and then you get into the distilling, and then you get into the barrel. It's a big data problem. And the fact is, we can't separate them all. We're only able to take it from the malt. So we ask for the same thing, but of course it's going to be different every year. It's not a scientific thing, but here's what we have. Right now we have 3 releases. I believe it's 3. We have the full pint, the Alba, and the Baroness.
The Baroness or no?
Right.
And what we're trying to get is single cask strength expressions to always be a way for you to learn about that grain.
Good.
But we're also trying to make sure that people don't think that the only way to enjoy the flavors of these malts is just in single cask strength. So we're also including them as a color or a flavor compound. By color, I mean a flavor compound in our blends, and that is featured. So like right now we have released 38 and 38 features Baroness malt, but it's not exclusive to Baroness malt.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to remember that for every release we put out, we're tasting lots of little bottles like these. So if we put out a single cask release, we've tasted another 12, 13 barrels that are, similar to that one, that give us the idea of whether there is a terroir to whiskey. And, I agree with Jason. There obviously is. If you say there isn't, you want to write about something that's controversial, or you want to not invest in that, or you're just not close enough to understand. I mean, whether it's a big enough difference to, get consumers excited might be a question, but there's a difference. It's quite obvious that there's a difference.
I took 6 samples to the American Society of Brewing Chemists 2 years ago and shared a presentation to them in which we actually tasted the whiskeys. And so they agreed, yes, these whiskeys do taste different, but they were new make whiskeys. They were before going into the barrel, because that was the only way that I was able to get them 6 different samples. If we had tried to do it in barrels, we had them in all different ages. So,
yeah. And in the previous session, I talked about our expansion and being able to make, over 1,000 barrels a year. At that point, it will be a little bit easier to do some more comparison, because in a single week, we could do a couple of different, barley varietal distillations, put them into the exact same lots of barrels, and really get a close comparison. Obviously every barrel is a little bit different, but that'll be much closer than what we're able to do with just our current production levels.
Boy, that'll be fun.
Question on barrels, actually.
I would have loved to have tried it with just the new make.
I wanted to throw in here. You guys talked a lot about, how Jason, you've had a very strong brewing background. Homebrewer myself, so I totally get that, respect it. It's amazing. Like, obviously, you're way beyond what I'm doing, but there's a lot of I get the nuances there with all the how long you ferment and the yeast you use. You're talking about the stills you have, but I'm thinking about right now some of our favorite distilleries, or very popular distilleries right now in the Scotland area. You got Bunhaven, you got Glendronach, you got Glenallachie. One thing in common with all those guys is the name Billy Walker comes to the forefront, and his claim to fame is the barrels. And so, we talked a lot about the brewing, we talked a lot about the distilling process, but part of what we haven't really talked about is the barrel aging, how you pick your barrels, how long do you put in the barrels, how do you move your barrels? I mean, that's got to be a massive part of the process. And how did you tell us about your process?
Man, this is the most fun I've had since I don't know when. I mean, you guys are asking the best questions. This is so cool. So first of all, thank you for that question. I love where it takes us. So let's just first of all ask the question. I'm going to use a scenario, and then I'm going to use it as an example. If you go into a distillery and all they talk about is water, they probably don't make their own product. They probably just buy product and then they add water. And their special sauce is that they have a well that creates a pretty cool water and they blend it. If you go into a distillery and all they talk about is their barrels, that's because that's the most flavor impact they can make. It's not their yeast, it's not their choice of grains, it's their barrel program. It's super important to them. That's most Scottish distilleries. I'm going to go on record saying that's most Scottish distilleries. They don't take their grain as a source of flavor. They take it as a source of sugar. They all use the same M1 yeast. It's all the same. Now, their stills are different. Their techniques are different, but mainly their barrels are different. So barrels are super important to us. That's why we specify our own barrels. That's why we're reusing them. We also enter in 4 different entry proofs, 110, 112, 115, and 120, so that we can experiment with penetration into the different toasts and different chars. We have those 3 different cooperages that we're using, and then we buy used barrels. I had a trip to Spain and Portugal. That gave me the chance to buy not seasoned new barrels that were what they call sherried cask, but actually Solera casks that have been in service between 40 and 200 years. Those are being used as a flavor component to some of our blends. Release 38 has 5% from a sherry cask. So the whole idea is absolutely true. Barrels matter so much, but they're not the only thing that matters. The real big data problem is if you had a particular type of grain and you malted it a particular way, what yeast should you use? What temperature should you ferment at? How should you make your cuts? What proof should you enter into what type of barrel? That's generational problems that we won't solve in our own time. But we're actually collecting data on all of it because that's the only way we're going to advance American single malt whiskey is by all telling that story and sharing, which is why we're a group.
Yeah, and Jason went on record saying, Scottish distilleries treat the barley as a commodity. I mean, big distilleries go on record saying that. I mean, you hear that from them directly when you take a tour. They think it's just sort of the source for the alcohol, and they move on and distill it and get it in the barrels. So it's true, it's not just our opinion. Yeah,
it's just a source of sugars for them.
Exactly.
And that is excusable because they're delicious whiskeys. They're trying to make a consistent product, and they're trying to serve it internationally. And so those are all problems we don't have. We don't have to make a consistent product, and we certainly aren't, well, except for the fact that we are now shipping to Canada, but we're not an international player racing for a price point. We're just simply making based on flavors.
Thank you, sir. And I'm going to forward the question from the side from Greg. You can see it on the bottom, and it's a good question because when people start out, they do make the vodkas and the gins. The influx of money is terribly important. It really is. But are these your babies and something you're going to hold on to, or are you going to focus mostly on the single malts from here on in? What do you think?
Sounds like a question from a distributor.
It does. From that guy right there.
So here's the short answer, Greg, and anybody else who cares, is that we haven't fully decided that yet. Let me tell you that we built Copperworks to be a single malt whiskey company. So I sometimes call us a whiskey company with a gin problem, meaning that we opened 3 years earlier of gin and everybody knew that Copperworks made gin and we made a big splash in it. We think it's delicious. We didn't make it for any other reason than because we thought it was really good and that it would help bring in cash while we're making whiskey. But the other fact is we make a lot of gin. So we are also a gin company with a whiskey problem. We know if we just focused on gin, we wouldn't have to be spending so much capital putting whiskey up. But we can't let go of whiskey. We believe in whiskey. We are primarily here to make whiskey, and the gin is a delicious hobby, if you would. It's not a thing that we're going to grow to be bigger than it is, other than, well, we have one coming out that's probably going to be pretty big. But other than that, it's just, we're just really focusing on these 3 products: vodka, gin, and whiskey. Vodka is not our focus, but we have to make it in order to make gin. So then we barrel age the gin. So that's 2 gins and whiskey.
So question for you.
Beer.
Hang on. Yeah. So you actually had a little terminology earlier that we've really only kind of heard about in the last 6 months. Jinski. And it's just because another rep company has brought a company from Boulder up here, and it's called Jinski. So I'm wondering, is this a new term, or is this an American term? Where is this term coming from? I know it's just, basically.
A long time ago, when we put gin in a new oak cask and it came out with flavors, this is back when Jeff was first coming on board and Micah and I were, Micah was still in production. We termed it Jinski. Ted was the master distiller at Boulder at the time. Ted used to work for me as a brewer at Pyramid Brewing, and he and his wife I knew pretty well, Donna. They divorced, but they're still really good friends. Donna and I met one day at a pub in Seattle when she was visiting, and I told her about this Jinski, and she said, "That's so cool. Can I tell Ted?" And I said, "Sure." So Ted asked if he could trademark it. I said, "Hell yeah, we're not going to call it that. That's not our brand, is to put that on the label." So it's really the two companies that you've heard from it are the two companies who are using that term. But I actually hope that it does become a term, because I think that it's a great segue for whiskey drinkers. I saw a comment earlier, gin, yuck, help me understand. And that's exactly what Jinski is. If you like whiskey and you don't like gin, here it is. This brings those two together to where you suddenly taste gin in a way that you're like, holy crap, this is the first gin I've been able to buy and enjoy. And we sell a lot of gin that way. So yeah, Jinski, it means that it's a gin that should be used in whiskey cocktails, old-fashioned, Sazeracs, mint juleps, and of course the Manhattan, which is called a Martinez.
I think it's really smart. I mean, as a food producer who uses a lot of equipment and machinery in what I do, looking at the world through the lenses you view the world in, you've taken a product and you've adapted it to increase your marginal revenue and decrease your marginal cost, and giving you a product that can stand up to anything, which is the ideal scenario for anyone who does mass production of anything. It's to use the equipment, use the facilities, use the inputs that you have, and maximize them to your benefit. And that's Jeff mentioned earlier that he was tired of being a lawyer and tried to chase his passion. And I mean, doing what I've done for 10 years in various evolutions of that, being a food producer myself, I stopped using the word passion. It stops being that. It now becomes the word obsession. You are no longer... Passion is for the people at home who want to bake cookies and make cakes on their countertops. What we do is we've invested our time, our money, our energy, our being, our lives, our families, and et cetera, to actually go into the world and say, put our stamp on it and say, we do this. Yep. This is our life. And
it's a philosophy, not just a hobby.
It's an obsession. And
my wife would certainly agree with you there, unfortunately.
And you have, I would even say you have to agree with it, because
for sure, yeah.
But what I'm speaking about is, like, you could have said that, yeah, we can make a gin. Why not? I mean, it's by far not as complicated as the whiskey process, but you've come out with a product that actually speaks volumes about what it is that you do as a philosophy, as a company. And you come up with something that says, this is as good as any product that stands on a shelf, regardless of how long you need to age it and how much of it we can turn over. And so tasting it neat and tasting it on rocks with Perrier, preferably I like my tonic in my whiskey, in my gin.
So what we had.
My three favorite to go to gins are going to be At the high end is Harris. At the mid end is the Botanist, and at the low end is Rangpur by Tanqueray. Okay, very deliberate, very on purpose notes, but all three of those companies have higher stakes in other things, and you're following suit and you're doing just as well as they are, which is to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ash. One of the biggest compliments we got came from the master distiller and owner Greg Winters and David Smith when they came up from Ventura at
from Almeida. Now you're infecting me with your disease here.
It's the whiskey talking. Yeah, we'll get to it in a second. But what they basically said is, you guys
St. George Spirits.
St. George Spirits, thank you.
Oh yes, the whiskey. Yep, I've seen them.
So what's good about St. George is they have a concept of philosophy of flavors, where I learned about that term. And they gave us a compliment. They said, you have a philosophy of flavor. What that means, and you can find this all around, but you can also find a big gap where it doesn't exist. Distilleries, breweries, winemakers, restaurants, they either have or don't have a philosophy of flavor. They have something that they're trying to produce. They have ways and methods and tools and ingredients that they're trying to create, or they don't. They're just trying to turn a buck. And nothing wrong with either of them, but the difference shines light on some of the flavors that you might find that are unique or very unusual at least. And I think what you just pointed out is you just mentioned 3 distilleries that have all got a philosophy of flavor. They're all attempting to do something that hasn't already been done. They're not an also-ran. They're pushing the edge of gin flavor.
At 3 different price points to mention. I mean, at 3 very unique price points. They accomplish 3 very different things. And I don't actually know what your price points are on this because I'm in Canada, but like just the color and the uniqueness of your botanicals that you've used inside of your gin.
John, actually, no, Ash, you asked that question before, what the botanicals were. We never got an answer to that, I don't think. So, Jason and Jeff, can we hear about the botanicals that go into it, please?
It's a trade secret.
Well, I'll go to another one.
We have none of
Totally
those.
Totally kidding.
So I want to give a quick answer, but Jeff can explain a little bit more. We take 115 gallons of 50% ethyl alcohol that we make by the barley. Okay. We soak 18.5 pounds of juniper from either Croatia or Albania, 3 pounds of coriander seed from Egypt, 1.5 pounds of lemon peel, 0.5 pound of orange peel, 0.5 pound of acacia bark. Then 1/4 pounds of orris root, angelica root, licorice root, kubub berries, a little peppercorn out of India, and grains of paradise, a little peppercorn out of Morocco. Those soak for 24 hours at room temp. We turn on the still, do a distillation in a still specifically designed to capture high volatiles but leave behind low volatiles. And so it's a really delicious non-resiny gin that comes out of that.
I love the efficiency of it. When you speak to me, I hear things and I'm like, that's efficient and beautiful and it makes sense. And like in my world, I'm like, that's exactly kind of what you want.
Hey, Jason, I'm going to piggyback on that. Kent, you said you're enjoying this. Why are you enjoying it as much as Ash?
Oh, I was totally enjoying the gin, but even more so, he just gave me the recipe for his gin. I no longer need that.
Wait, but you don't have the coordinates of the places we source them from. So I'm going to go next and give you
terroir.
I'm going to see I can hit those pretty close.
You know, the funny thing is, we try to be as transparent as we can. Here, you know, when Jeff made that joke, you know, we tell you, but we'd have to kill you, or it's a trade secret. There are no trade secrets, are there? If you go to a brewer and you say, how do you make a stout? I'm a home brewer. I want you to write me a stout recipe. They'll pull out a blank piece of paper, and in 2 minutes, they will have you a stout recipe. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. It's what they do.
Yeah.
So what makes their recipe different is everything that goes into it: the shape of their equipment, the temperature of their mash, all their enzymes that they are getting in the malt, everything they do. I'm not worried about somebody, and none of us are worried about Copperworks being stolen. What we're hoping is that people become better distillers as we share information. The rising tide will float all of our boats. So our goal is to educate distillers. We offer a week. If you come in for a week, if you're a distiller, show up, spend a week here. We won't charge you, but we will help you become.
Dolphin, we are on our way.
We're not supposed to broadcast that because we get too many people without broadcasting it. But
Yeah.
We've got 19 people watching. We're good. Kent and I are
I'm
up
gonna
there,
say,
so we're
it's
do it.
been the way that we spread the love. So when the Scottish distillers gave us so much information without any filtering, we pass that on, and we just feel like it's the way we're all going to get better is by sharing it.
And it goes beyond just the process too. I think in the last session, Ash was talking about the packaging, right? It's how you feel when you drink it. It's maybe a memory you had from Seattle, not to sound shallow about it, but all those things matter, right? You have that feel of Americana, you have that feel of Seattle, and that all goes into it. And, if you make it at home, maybe you make something that tastes similar, but you don't have that whole story and feeling behind it.
I want people
Jeff,
to
I agree with you.
look into the bottle. There's so much detail to attention on the bottle. There's actually the barley chevron pattern on the inside of both labels as you stare into it.
I don't know how Ash is getting all of this. It's 11:30 at night in Toronto. There's barely any light where they are, and he can see the minutia that's in there.
And it's actually all three bottles, even the small label, or all three labels, even the small label.
It's all there.
That's not a cheap decision.
It's the type of thing that matters. That's the type of attention to detail that matters, and that's about the philosophy. Is are you really proud of what you're doing? Are you really trying to put this thing? So
I think we're getting rid of Josh and keeping Ash because his attention.
Hold on.
Josh will pick it up in a bit. It's good. He's going to push him out of the screen. This right-hand man of his. It's like, you're out of here. Jason, I'm piggybacking back on that. I like the spec sheets because we can go online, see the PDF spec sheets of what's in the whiskey. And I'm wondering if you got the idea from Compass Box, and if not, whose idea was it? And it's different from what Compass Box does, and that's one of the reasons why I liked Compass Box right from the very beginning, because they were transparent, and the fight that they had with the Scotch Whiskey Association, I love that, and they took them on.
So proud of them for fighting that fight. That was a good
story about that later.
But
it was a thing that, so you remember that I took 13 years off of brewing and I got into IT. My master's was in information management, and my very specific thing was in taxonomies, building controlled vocabularies.
Okay.
So one of the things that I loved is presenting data. And it made a lot of sense to me that other nerds out there in the long tail would really want to know some of the details. Why not publish them? This is not the end state for us. This is a very clumsy tool. A PDF is a very awful way to do this. If you ever get a chance to look at a website from a American distillery called Tomfoolery, I've never been to them. I've never tasted their products. I am so impressed with their information management that they set a bar, and my thought was, how can I be at least that good? How can Copperworks tell more information? And the whole goal is just to be completely transparent.
That site is like talking to Dr. Don Livermore.
Isn't it?
Oh, it is. It's absolutely is.
So great. It's so great. So we have a long way to go. We just put it on a PDF. It didn't come from Compass Box, although I'm super excited about everything Compass Box is doing. But it's mainly just our information management background and interest in sharing.
And it's not just information management. I think it's just sort of who we are as people, right? Is people ask you a question and you give them the honest truth. There's some people that are like that, and there's some people that aren't. My wife is always making fun of me, like, why did you tell them all that? Why did you do that? And she's like, I don't know. That's who I am. That's who Jason is. That's who Micah is. Totally. And there was a big problem brewing, and especially American whiskey, with transparency. And I think it was kind of good timing for folks like us to come along and say, you know what, there's a transparency issue. We were always willing to share, but let's throw it all out there to really prove that, So most people aren't going to look at the spec sheet in detail. Some people will, very small percentage, but it just shows people, like, if you want to know it, send us an email, give us a phone call, come on by, ask us a question. We'll give you the best answer we have.
We've had distillers apply to Copperworks specifically because we posted that information, and that was something I was very proud of. It was like, okay, good, we're sharing, and
You're on the right track at that point.
Felt like it, yeah.
Transparency's it. Richard, I haven't asked you about the gin yet, and you're the only person. Actually, Joss, you have to tell me what you think about the gin as well.
Yeah, I think Joss and I have been pretty silent here. It's interesting that my wife's favorite gin comes from Oliver at the Douglas Distillery, Noteworthy Gin. And I poured this for her a couple of nights ago. Stuck it under her nose, and she smelled it, and she said, "Oh, this is just like Noteworthy. This is Stevely's." And then she looked at it, and she said, "This is not Stevely's." And one of the marked similarities between the two gins is that they both use 100% malted barley, and I think that really shines. And I think if you're targeting whiskey drinkers with gin, I think this is the kind of thing that we want, whether it's barrel aged or not. But having 100% malted barley, that flavor comes through. And I'm really liking it. My wife really likes it. So if she likes it and she's a gin drinker, I'm a moderate gin drinker. I tend to stick to whiskey, but she likes it, and it's solid. So yeah, loving it.
Good answer. Jason, it's double distilled, right?
Yeah.
You don't have a plate still whatsoever.
I guess he would call it triple distilled, because we take the low wines, we take the beer, we make low wines, we run it through a 25 plate, 13-inch diameter column.
And
so
then
that's
you
the second
infuse it.
distillation, and then we take that GNS base and redistill it as gin.
That's a good side column still.
Yeah,
Yes,
we could call it 27 times distilled. We prefer not to say. We prefer to do exactly what Jason did and walk you through the whole process.
Yeah.
If we call it anything, we call it twice distilled vodka, 3 times distilled gin. But we're not really interested in the number of distillations. It's more about, I'll have to say, the fewer distillations, the more flavor that comes through. So for us, it's limiting the number of distillations, not increasing them. And of course, no charcoal filtering.
Can I ask a very esoteric question?
No, you're not allowed to, because Joss is actually going to tell us about the gin, and then you can.
What do you think about
the gin?
No, that's the rule.
I guess I had a few hot minute questions here related to the gin, but also to the distillery. The gin, lovely. I love the barley influence. I didn't even think you could do a full barley gin and oak age it. I thought that would be sacrilege, but here I am loving it, and here we are drinking it. But with Dole's permission, I've got a few hot minute questions. I just want to throw towards Jason, Jeff. We'll keep it really succinct, but we talked about this offline. But are you guys a Scottish-influenced American distillery, or are you an American distillery trying to do Scottish-related products?
Jeff, you take that.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're an American whiskey distillery first and foremost. I think, there were so many variables that we were changing, given that we were going to start with a high-quality unhopped beer. And then we were going to do a lot of, American whiskey style aging in new American oak, but then also play with our what you'd call first fill or reused barrels, depending on where you live, sherry barrels, all kinds of things in the warehouse that we're going to play around with. So we did want to stay consistent in the still house, source our stills from Scotland, and do sort of a Scottish style distillation. But I would say, in terms of Scottish influence, if I had to pick a number, I'd probably say about 20%, maybe then 30% traditional American whiskey, and sort of 50% New World whiskey / brewing influence. So I think that the ethos of our distillery is to do something entirely new. We could replicate other products and probably do okay at it and have a higher price than they have. But we wanted to make something that really adds to the story of the world of whiskey, rather than try to make an American, traditional American whiskey or Scottish whiskey. We wanted to make a Copperworks American single malt whiskey.
All right, I'll pyramid down my questions here because I have a few, but I think the one that everyone loves to hear is, what was your greatest failure?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'll say several things. One thing that we didn't fail on is we didn't fail on building out, and I was very proud of the fact that we were able to build out without having to redesign. Every brewery I've been in, we've had to tear up the concrete and start over again on some part or another. But in this case, we did. Probably our biggest failures, and Ash may even be surprised to hear this, is that we didn't go into this thinking of it as a business. We went into this thinking of it as a passion. We made all of our decisions based on flavor. None of our decisions based on cost of goods. None of our decisions based on go-to-market strategy. We've all become business people by the hard knocks of surviving 9 years so far. And I'll have to say, if I had it all to do over again, I would have at least asked for somebody with any background in business to have been there at the beginning.
Yep.
It's not to say that we didn't do a good job of getting to this point, but it's been an uphill struggle the entire time because we're also running a business. Oh shit, I forgot that we're running a business. We're just making great product. So that's been our biggest.
Now, Jason, you said that, but I read an article. I've read many articles about you guys, but in this article, you were saying you will talk to any distiller that wants to start out, and you will tell them all the hard knocks things in life, but you said you need 5 times the amount of money that you think you need to start off. So I think you have thought about the business side just a wee little bit at least.
Yeah, but I didn't learn that opening. I learned that from the past 9 years.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say, is sort of underestimating the amount of cash it takes to go sell and market a product. When you start a craft distillery, you think about, it's all about, can I distill something amazing, and can I think about the technical side of it? But, as a business, you have to go sell and market it, and people aren't just going to find you by accident unless they're huge whiskey nerds, which we love huge whiskey nerds because they're most of the way we get our word out. But you need to get your word out a little bit better than that as well. So it's tough.
Can I ask Jeff a question personally? Because Jason has the experience to back it up, and he's way more seasoned. And I feel like I relate to Jeff in a way where we've transitioned away from the traditional career paths that either our parents or even ourselves have expected from whether our parents or ourselves. So how did it feel to eat shit for doing what you do? And I mean, look, I say this lovingly because I did it myself, and I know to a certain degree how it feels. But look, every entrepreneur who gets into this, even Dolph can go to this, and Jason can say this, like at least 50 times a year, can go like, why the hell did I do this? And remember, you were a lawyer. You went to school like 8 years after I finished. Like,
not quite, but yeah, I'm not a doctor.
but like we're close.
Articling and everything. You spent a lot of time at school.
You spent a lot of time. You come out on the other side, and
now look at you.
What was it worth it? Like, do you feel like it was worth it? Like the life of distilling, the life of whiskey, the life of gin, the life that you have now, was it worth it?
Jeff, was it worth it? What do you bring to the table? All that. Tell us all.
It's definitely worth it. So, I still have lots of friends in the legal industry, and I meet them from time to time and have calls with them from time to time. And, every once in a while you get a little envious of, oh, I just made partner and they're making $300,000-$400,000 a year or more. Yeah. You get a little envious, but then you remember how you felt when you were doing that work and you say, not worth $2 million a year, and so it's definitely worth it. And I think the thing is, and we talked about these words, passion, at first, and you said your job has become more of an obsession, and I agree with that. At first the passion drives you, right? So you're coming on, you're making $0 and then a tiny bit of money, and then you gradually get up to more reasonable amounts of money that you can actually support yourself. The passion drives you at the beginning, and then it becomes that obsession. And then at the obsession point, you have no choice, right? You love it so much that you're going to do whatever it takes to make it work. And there's some parts of it that suck, right? I mean, every day there's parts that suck.
Well, Jason,
but there's so many. So yeah, there's so many fun parts too, though, like this, right, where we're just like sitting around drinking and talking. And this is my job, right? I'm doing work right now, which is weird.
Like Dolph is self-employed. He knows it, and Jason's been around the block and some, and like as a 3x2 block. Like as I relate to you, because we're relatively within the same age range, and we've like gone through a career change dramatically. It's good to see that people have learned from others and found themselves in symbiotic relationships that yield amazing product, and that is.
I mean, like
I said, I love the product.
Like I said in the last session, it was kind of weird that like Jason and I were drinking Stranahan's around the same time, not knowing each other on totally opposite coasts. He was this master brewer, and I was this like young beer nerd. So there's a lot of kind of weird things about the story that made it a good fit.
We share a brother-in-law. If you want to get even weirder,
Ash, I want to tell you a quick.
Right, I got one last question. We're at 57 minutes. I've gotten 7 pages out of 15 done, but I have one last I really want to, because I found this really quite cool. He's making fun of me, but he knows that I'm always prepared for these things. And I think he's envious, that little bugger down there in the corner. Stop it.
And Ash is just shocked 10,
by the way, if you want to know the question. So.
Hell, I'm surprised we still have 16 viewers on with us.
Hey, you're the one that printed it out,
I did. It's me. You have a panel that helps you decide on the taste of the whiskey. I really like this thing. You get everyone involved. It's very inclusive. Everyone that works within the production side of your distillery comes together, and you talk about the whiskey. Now, I'm wondering, personally, who decides? I've asked this of many different distillers, because I would love to see people who do a single batch or several single batches to come up with a different ABV or proof, in your case, for my friendly Americans, for each barrel. And I'm wondering what stops you from tasting the 6 barrels. There's 6 barrels, melding them together, and then coming up with a really unique proof. Instead of 50, instead of 46, which happens a lot in Scotch, why not 46.7, 51.2? I'm wondering what stops you from really trying to pinpoint your the point of glory for your whiskey, because it's not consistency. You've talked about consistency, and that is not your it's not your metric for excellence, and you've talked about that, and I love that part. And it's not labeling, because you have a different label for every bottle that you come out with. So what's stopping you from doing this with this group of people? Because I know you could veto whoever you wanted at the end. What's stopping you from going beyond 50, changing things up? And this is a question I've asked many people, so I don't know answers to this.
Let me share, first of all, let me share how we got into this taste panel. If you're making a consistent product and you want it to be the same year after year, industry and area after area, you need to hire one person, and that person's job is to make it consistent.
Okay. Yep.
That's not our issue. We're on the opposite. We're making a new expression with each release. So the best thing we can do is to have at least as many voices in that decision making as are the individual palates that we know how to train. So we took notes for 2 years. We just put them in a piece of paper in our notebooks. Remember, my background's in information management. I turned that into a vocabulary. We took that vocabulary, we trained ourselves on it, but we don't reference it. We continue to use everybody, not just in production, but also in the tasting room.
Okay.
We want those folks to be involved too, because they have palates that over the years are maturing. Who knows if they're going to become the next distiller, if they're going to be able to become the next blender. We want them to be as educated as we are. And over the years, they get there. What our goal is to make delicious whiskey, not consistent whiskey. So by having a lot of voices in, we can hit different decisions. The first thing is, what are the barrels we're going to pick, and how do they act with each other? The more people who know that, the more longevity this company will have. It can't just be one person. It needs to be all of us. Then we decide what proof to make it. Now, it turns out that our proofs are usually triple digits, between 100 and 106. Lately, we've been hitting around 100 all the time. It's not because we want 100 all the time. It's just because that's what we liked that proof at. We can proof it at 100.2 or 100.4. And frankly, when we do, we just round it down to the easiest number to make a whole number. It's just no reason to add the decimal point, because it's not that big of a difference. But the first thing is always flavor, which barrels go together, and then what proof should they be expressed at. That's what we print the label for, and everybody's involved in that. There's no Trump decision. If we can't agree, we don't bottle those barrels. We wait until we find barrels that we can bottle. We frequently run into problems where it's like, nope, I don't like that. It's just awful. Sometimes if everybody else says it's delicious, you're just the weird one. That's okay. There's going to be a 20%, customer out there that's a weird one. But if we're all like, no, that's not good, one of us isn't going to come in and say, not me, not Jeff. We're going to say, we're going to bottle it anyway. That doesn't happen. We don't let that happen.
And that's an excellent way to finish this off. So we're going to go to everyone. Very last comments, quick last comments. Gentlemen, we're at an hour and 3 minutes, and we're going to start with Richard. And I don't know where Joss went, but we're going to get him back in a second.
He didn't want to comment. You first.
Yeah, he'd had enough. Last comment. I'm thoroughly impressed with the single malt and thoroughly impressed with the gin. But I think more than the drinks that I've had tonight, it's been lovely meeting the two of you and finding out that the people behind the quality whiskey and gin drinks are quality people, and that makes a huge difference in my books. So thank you, and I appreciate it so much. I look forward to taking a boat down, whether it's the Ana Cortez or whatever, and driving down to Seattle and saying hi to you guys at some point. Thank you.
Comments, Richard.
Thank you.
I'm thinking for Dolph and me, it's only about 16 hours, 14 hours if I'm driving, 16 hours if he's driving. The boys are back. You know what? It is awesome to meet people that are building a quality product. We Dolphin Me, we last 2 years now, 2 and some now. We've been doing this kind of whiskey journey, and we've met a lot of like-minded people like this, and it is just mind-blowing how much we get to meet people that aren't recognized in the industry because they're not a Smirnoffs. They're not a they're not a huge conglomerate. The crap that people drink, if the general public realized what they could actually be drinking, they just would be dumbfounded.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's part of the show. We educate one person at a time. Right. We go out, we talk to individuals, or we're sitting in a store quite often. You'll see something they're looking at the bottom shelf because they're going to take it home and they're going to mix their rum and coke or the rye and coke or a vodka and orange, whatever. And you're like, hey, you know what? You can drink this straight. And they're like, what? Something that's that good you can drink straight? Oh, yes. Yep. Greg, yes, very much. General public is afraid of flavor. Luckily enough, I have a very large group now growing of friends that like flavor. And tomorrow night, they'll be sitting around the fire with us as well. So,
and we'll be trying your stuff tomorrow night, John. It'll be
cool.
Good. Joss. Yes. Joss?
Yeah, right here.
Last comments, buddy.
Oof, last comment. Man, is this like a closing comment or a question?
Closing comment, no questions.
No more questions.
That's the after dram.
Yeah, we have other questions off air.
Then we'll go with this. Gentlemen, great session. Loved your products. I mean, the whiskey was great. The gin was even more surprising. I learned a lot. Thank you for your candidness. And it's been a very honest and informational and just really enjoyable session. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank
you, Joss. Great comments. Ash, how about you?
I don't like to normally give kudos for the sake of doing so. It's like just pointless. And as a food producer, I'd rather, Joss and I were talking about this earlier, I'd rather you give me the bad than the good. Like, tell me what I can do better. And your product is one of those where I can't point out a single fault or necessarily make it better. Like, it's not to say that it couldn't be better. It's just to say that, like, I couldn't do better. And like, it's one of those things, like, when you get into food or drink, it stays with you. You want to be better every single day. It's the reason why we go to work. It's to go and be better every single day. And so I thoroughly enjoyed both products that we've had today. I do have a question after we get offline, but I have to say kudos. Like, they very good. Like, and for gin especially, like whiskey, in my world, like, I have a ton of bottles, as does Joss, and I get to drink his collection. He gets to drink mine. We get to drink the shared collection between the club, and it easily stands up to everything, and then some. And that's not like what's the saying? Sunshine up your ass. This is not that. It's saying that you committed to the craft and you've done very well, and especially for a young distillery, I thoroughly enjoy it. I know what I like. Here's the thing. I think a lot of the viewers and a lot of us online know what we like, and we're easy to call out what we don't. And this is not one of those situations where we don't. So, Jeff and Jason, kudos to you guys. As I said, I do have a question for you after we end, but like,
You've
But he's done.
a remarkable job.
We're ending on the kudos to you.
Okay.
Love
Jeff,
it.
you're
Love
up.
it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if maybe the product doesn't need improvement, but I think we can improve by coming to visit Canada and coming to all of you folks
Now you're
and
talking.
hanging out and getting to know you and your groups and sharing some spirits. So I'll make that my resolution. It might have to be for next year, looking like, but maybe at the end of this year. But definitely looking forward to visiting.
Canada is opening its borders August 9th.
You're good. We'll put you up. You've got a point.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Victoria Whiskey Festival. Come to the
But
Victoria
yeah,
Whiskey Festival.
thanks for having us. This was so much fun.
Oh, our pleasure. Jason?
Well, thank you again. Yeah, it is really a privilege to be on this. And I'll have to say that Canada was the first place where we were able to take some of our inventory and move it out of Washington State. We're very much looking forward to doing that a lot more. And so I don't think this will be the last time that you get a chance to see Copperworks somewhere in Canada. I'm hoping that we're going to be much more prevalent up there as we grow. And this is all part of this campaign we're launching here next week, is to grow ourselves by 10 times. And not in a bad way. I just want to point out, we're not going to be just becoming mass produced. We're just going to be able to make so much more whiskey.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So thank you guys. Thanks so much, Dolph. I really appreciated all your deep questions, and I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
It was our pleasure. It really, really was. So that's it. Whiskey brothers, whiskey sisters, whiskey friends. Fantastic evening. Thanks to our listeners for joining us. Thanks to our panel. Ash, Joss, Kent, Rich. Absolute pleasure spending this time with you all. Special thanks to Jason Jeff from Copperworks Distillery on Alaskan Way, right on the waterfront, Seattle, Washington, USA. I learned so much, had entirely too much fun. I really did. So join us next Sunday, August 1st at 10 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time, 9 o'clock for those on the coast over there, which is 7 p.m. IDT, which is Israel Daylight Time for our guests from Tel Aviv, Israel. We'll be continuing our 10-week international whiskey journey with Milk and Honey Distillery. I'm really looking forward to this, and so should you. So final note, if you don't want to miss a minute of anything, like, subscribe, all that stuff. But gentlemen, let's hold up a glass. As always, my friends, here's the good company, all these gentlemen around me. Here's the good whiskey, which back there, we already had lots of it. Here's the good conversation, and here's to seeing you next week. Sláinte, everybody. Have a fantastic night.